At the beginning of the year, when I'm thinking about strategy groups and who I'm going to place in what strategy group and what I'm going to teach them, the first thing that I do is I do a lot of research conferences. I'm just now getting to know the kids. I have their reading levels from the beginning, well, the end of last year, and I don't yet know where they are this year. But I'm just getting to know them as readers, what do they like, and sometimes I'm even just getting to know them personally so that they know that a reading conference isn't really that scary, that I'm just going to be coming around constantly throughout the year and checking on them. Some of the things that I do also is I compliment them a lot. And while I'm complimenting them, I'm also telling them things that I would like them to be doing. It's just, I like the way that you're keeping your eyes focused in your book, or I like the way that you are sticking with this book. You haven't returned it to the library before you're done reading it. And those are things that I start taking notes on. I start noticing things that maybe I do need to pull them for a strategy group. Maybe they aren't having a lot of stamina, and they are the kids who are always looking at me whenever they're supposed to be looking in their book. So those are the types of conferences that I start with in the beginning of the year, and those lead into my strategy groups. It directly relates to my cafe wall also. And I really focus a lot on the behavior aspect of it before I start thinking about more of the comprehension, because I don't really get to that part until I've kind of assessed their reading level for myself. I might have a good understanding of what they were like last year, but coming into my room this year might be totally different.
How do you keep track of all that?
Yeah, so one thing that I tried this year that was a little different was I did do the note cards where I have all the kids' names, and then I have the dates that I met with them, and I just have, positive things that I've told them and things that I want to teach them. And then I start finding kind of a common ground between, okay, there's 4 kids over here that need the same thing. So then I start putting them in strategy groups. And we just kind of focus on, for instance, this was like the second week of school, and we're talking about focusing. That was 4 kids that really needed that in my afternoon class. Or even just checking for understanding, because I noticed that certain kids would read a page, then could not tell me, what it was about. Mm-hmm. So those kind of strategy groups. Once we get into the data, though, that's when I start moving to more of the skills.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then that's helpful, because then you have your data from your checkpoints and your DPMs.
Yes.
And then we come together, and you guys come with your data analysis form, where we can look at those targeted groups to see the areas they're struggling in, because if we can reach those at-risk students, we can reach everybody.
Yeah.
And so this kind of helps us with that, and then we can look across and say, okay, number 3 was on media literacy, and that was the most missed. But Ms. Nadolkovsky, wow, it wasn't your most missed. Your class rocked it. So what are you doing? How can we teach that like you're teaching it? Mm-hmm. And then we can all make a plan. I can come in and observe to see how the students are reacting to that, and we can get back together, see if after the next checkpoint, did our scores in that area go up? Did they improve? And then what's our next area we need to look at? Another thing that I like you guys using is your
kind of skill
analysis. Data analysis, so that way you can look to see, like right here, number 10 on inferring, wow, that's a mini lesson, almost everybody missed that one. But here on vocabulary, number 6, that could be a strategy group. You could just pull those students, use that language of the test, and
I think it's important too that we know that we're not just putting a test question in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
We're like you said, we're using that language, but it's coming directly from books.
Right.
And
right.
It could be the books that we read during read aloud, or it can be books that they're reading independently, and they don't have to be the same. We're not drilling questions, but we're using that language.
Right. And I like that, because then when they get to test taking, they see this is the same work
Yeah.
that we're doing in reading, it's just a whole different
Mhm.
language.
Well, this is totally back to what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I like on your cards there that you have the date on there that you met with them. Because I've tried things like, I've done a big calendar, and I keep the calendar with me.
Mhm.
I've tried things in like the iPad where I have the Confer app, and it'll tell me what day I've met with what kids, and it tells me, the last time I saw the other ones.
Yeah.
But I like that that's a visual, because you could just put the same dates on there, and that'll help you keep track of who you've seen in a while, who you
Yeah.
haven't. You could even color code that.
The
You
only
could-
thing that
Like
I struggled with was having to flip to see the common ground,
Mhm.
because I do like all of this, and it kept me visual to see,
Mhm.
okay, I have not met with that child in 2 weeks or a week, but finding the common, okay, it was inferring on all three of these.
And that was my thing with the app too, the Confer app. It'll tell you when the last time you met with them is, and you can always adjust it to do what the level is. You can group it by level, you can group it by other things. But maybe if we combined it and we did, because I've thought about in the past, and I've tried in the past doing a page per student, kind
Yeah.
of like that one. And then maybe you have a little chart on the front that gives the date you met them, or you could have a little chart on the front
Yes.
that gives what you did for the last group too. Because I feel like that's always the hardest thing, is tracking the last time you met with them and what you worked on with them. So
What if you
could
had a
always
grid on the
combine
back with the strategies?
And check, put their initials or something.
And then as you're noticing they're having a hard time with something, you can come, oh my goodness, she needs to really work on that,
And already
thinking
put
deeper and
put them in
inferring.
that.
Let's put
Mhm.
Sally under inferring,
Nice.
and let's move on to the next student. And then as that builds, there's your strategy.
I think that would work better.
Mm-hmm. And you can even put the date on there too
Love
if
it.
you
Like
needed to
that.
keep track of that. I just think that that's the hardest part, is remembering when you met with them
Yeah.
and what you met with them on so far. Finding a way to put that onto one.
You know, we were talking to a teacher just the other day, and she had a grid and with a student's name in each box, and what she didn't like about that was that she couldn't see one student's
Yeah.
data. But then what we ended up coming back to was that she put a sticky note in each grid, so that after the grid filled up and she knew she saw every student, she can then go and put the student's sticky note
On
in
their
their
paper.
In their
page.
paper.
And
Uh-huh.
I know teachers that have done that with like labels
Yes.
as well. They've done the
Just
label
got rather
thing.
expensive. I did that one
Yeah.
last year. But the one thing that I
Sometimes they
did,
stick to your shoes,
Yeah.
sometimes they end up as wallpaper.
I did like
You can
this
delete-
one.
you can delete that part.
If you don't move them, then you got a big problem and a big mess.
Yeah. I just like this one because you could see, okay, this is what I talked to you about last week.
Mhm.
With the labels and stuff, you really couldn't unless you were flipping kid to
Mhm.
kid. This just seemed a little more efficient, but, there's.
And I've used the calendar in the past where I fill in, because I used to have so many things pop up during workshop that are unexpected. Oh, we have, meeting here. We have
Mhm.
this, they're being pulled for counselor today. So I was trying to also keep track of how much reading time did they get. So I would
Yeah.
put in here what happened on those days as well, so that I could keep track. Well, I didn't even get to meet with them on Tuesday and Thursday because we had a counselor meeting during reading, and then we had library the next day. So in order to track myself and keep myself accountable for how many times have I really met with them this month, I would also kind of do that at the beginning.
I'm gonna make copies of it. Tell us some more about once DPNs and checkpoints start. Do you start testing them to death, or what happens? What do your strategy groups start, or what do they look like in your classroom?
Once I get all of my data back, I like this form where it has the kid's name on the side, kind of like the district analysis form that they give us, and then we mark which ones they miss. Because for me, when they start to continually miss summary or inference, I take that, and not only do I make it a mini lesson, I also input it into my read aloud. That becomes my read aloud skill, and I will start modeling it and asking them to do it for 2 weeks. And then I'll hopefully see progress, and by then I should have my next checkpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can assess that data. If I haven't seen progress on it, I'll keep it in my read aloud. I'll continue, if it's for the whole class, I'll continue to do it as a mini lesson again. I'll hit it again. If I do see progress, I'll slowly wean it out of my read aloud and add in the next one from my list that they struggled with.
And I think too that what I'm hearing you guys say is before all the testing starts, like you're pulling those strategy groups.
Yeah.
And then once the testing starts and then you're realizing what they need, you're doing the same thing as what Jennifer's doing, but you're
Mhm.
starting to include that new language
Mhm.
that the
Mhm.
students are having difficulty with, the vocabulary and the testing.
And I'm
test
really
time.
using that read aloud time to make sure I'm modeling those and
Exactly.
getting that extra practice.
Mhm.
And I'm not necessarily, if they're missing summary, I'm not necessarily having them write a summary after every single
Mhm.
chapter. I might have
Yeah.
them do it in a unique way. I might have them now make it a journal entry. Maybe
Yeah.
make it like a newspaper reporter or a reporter, if that's what the theme of the book is or something. But I'm still trying to get them to practice it, just not in a test-taking
And it always
environment
helps
each time.
because they're really engaged with the read aloud already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they really don't
Yeah, they
know that they're seriously practicing that skill because
Mhm.
it's exciting to them already.
You know what I've noticed in your classrooms that I like is that, like, I see you guys, like, when you teach a strategy, you build an anchor check with the students, and then once their checkpoints start to happen and you realize the language that they're having difficulty with, then you might write that language
Yeah.
on a sticky note or a sentence strip and then add that to the same anchor
Mhm.
chart. I think that gives them confidence in realizing that this is just what you've been doing in your books and enjoying. It just sounds a little different.
Yeah, and it's like when it comes to, this might not be on topic, but when it comes to the questions that ask about character analysis, because a lot of times, especially when they get to 4th grade, that's where they're really hitting. They need to understand their characters.
Mhm.
I'll pull that word that they might not understand, or we will analyze our character in the read aloud, and if our character is a determined person, we will make a poster drawing a picture of what determined
What
looks
it
like.
looks like.
We'll have the word on there, we'll pop it on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully by the time they get checkpoints, they won't even realize that I'm pulling those checkpoint words that they might not have known. We compare it and we use it with our read aloud, we put it up, and they're learning those, character traits, which are
Mhm.
important when it comes to the higher levels.
Because sometimes they know what the character is doing and feeling
They
and
just
stuff like
don't
that.
know
They
what
just
that
don't
word
know that
is.
vocabulary word,
Mhm.
especially when they're having to read it independently too. They don't,
Mhm.
it doesn't register with them.
But after every checkpoint, it depends if my groups are consistently staying the same, where I have a friend that's still missing summary. I'll, go through my checkpoint analysis, and if that's what they're still missing, I can also pass that on to Berger or
Mhm.
whoever the reading interventionist they're working with. They can practice it there. And a lot of times, my friends that I also invite for tutoring are missing the same thing.
Yes.
So I might spend one tutoring practicing summary, and then I'll practice whatever the next big one they missed is, and I'll continue hitting it in before and after school tutoring if needed too.
Absolutely.
If it's something that they're continually missing, I can always ask them, and that's what they can make sticky notes on for homework as well. Instead of just asking them to read, I can ask them, how about we work on just a shorter part? Let's read a chapter tonight, and I want you to work on making a summary for the chapter.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I'm still hitting it, and I'm not asking them to do
Pick A, B, C, or D.
but I'm having them still work on that.
Mhm.
And one sticky note is easy for me to assess in the morning while they're coming in during.
Exactly. And it's tangible for them to do
announcements.
also.
Mhm.
It's not.
And it's easy for me to check when we switch. It's something simple that they can pop on their desk, and I can check it
Yeah.
when I have time to walk around, and we can move on. And I still know that they're getting that practice.
Yeah.